that racially charged?
No. Is it?
Yeah, it might be.
What's wrong with the world where you can't say that?
That's
It's Borat, like.
yeah, that's racially charged.
Come on. Surely that falls under parody.
That's not the thumbnail.
That's not the thumbnail.
You got your speaking voice on now.
Hell yeah, brother.
Questions and answers. See, that doesn't feel racially charged.
Oh, we're here. We're live. If you're tuning into this and you're at the start, will you please just press the like button?
There's nobody here yet.
No, but when they're watching back to this. Oh, the lads are here.
Morning. I've missed you both from the terms. Lovely day outside, isn't it?
Massive day, yeah. Jesus, we've had some lovely weather last week. Oh, it was snowing last night. It's snowing up by ye.
No.
Went to collect my parents from the airport at midnight, full on snow.
Fuck it.
Yeah,
Where are the parents?
they're in Lanzarote.
Lanzarote with me, man.
Lanzarote.
How do I go from the hair is perfect that you need a haircut 4 months ago? You know, why does it? My barber's always
I
like,
think it's the curls.
my barber's like, you said you'd come in sooner this time. I was like, I know, I planned to come in 2 weeks ago, and then
You know, our buddy Rory books his haircuts months in advance. He just has them like scheduled out.
he's actually probably correct.
Yeah.
You think about buzzing it again?
I really want to buzz it, yeah, but obviously I won't be buzzing it in the next month. Holy moly.
Yes, lads. Limit. Well, let me turn off the timer. So the timer defaults on this.
What is the timer?
I'm early for once. Strength training, my age, 19 track cyclists. Yugdrandy, you're going to have to... Okay,
Yeah.
actually, no, hang on. I don't know. So strength training for track cyclists is incredibly straightforward. It is so straightforward. You should be thankful. You should be like, yes, I picked a sport where strength training has an incredibly direct transfer to my sport. Now, assuming you're... Oh, you did say track cyclist. That's even better.
Yeah.
So that's just... You're in the best case scenario. Track cycling, if you get a stronger body, you will be better at cycling. Your wattage will be higher. And if you can transfer that to winning matches, well, or whatever you call them in cycling events, that's beyond
Races?
this in a cycling race, that's beyond the scope of me or us, because we're not on the bike. But in terms of what you need to do for track cycling, you need a bigger squat. I see a better relationship with deeper squats, and as we do for most sports, with transfer to the bike. You should be very proficient at single leg squats. However, when you're doing single leg squats, you cannot do the bullshit ones. If you're doing a Bulgarian, the barbells on your back, you know where they sit back onto their calf? No.
No.
Straight up and down. Back knee touches the floor, gets very, very close to it, depending on your leverages. Front knee is approximately, front shin is approximately perpendicular with the
Yeah.
ground. Or you're doing really heavy ones and it's loading the front leg. But if you're doing Bulgarians and you're loading the back leg, straight up and down. Your hips shouldn't be going back onto your calf. Don't load up 180 kilos and give me a bullshit one. Deep, high bar squats or mid bar, full range of motion. You're 19 years old. I'd like to see you get to double body weight pretty soon, assuming at 19 you could be 60 kilos, is which rate you should be squatting 120 kilos right now for reps. Also have some kind of hinging or deadlifting. It's very important for general strength, posterior position. It helps your squat. So deadlifting is good, and I see good benefit to that with cyclists. But you can pick RDLs, you can pick low block stiff-legged deadlifts, you can pick deficit deadlifts, some kind of hinging, and you have to be training your upper body. You have to be training your core, you have to be training your upper back, you have to train your lower back, you need to train some of your pressing muscles. Your body's ability to brace and transferring power to the legs and your bike is incredibly important, so don't avoid upper body training. Use bench pressing or strict pressing, weighted dips if you want. You obviously need to be conscious of how much muscle you gain and body weight, but unless you're blasting a load of gear, you're not going to suddenly be going from, you know, zero upper body muscle mass to suddenly having a terrible drag factor. That just won't happen. And especially if you're watching your body weight. So squatting, hinging, deep squats, single leg work, core work, upper body strength. That's strength training. Also, don't forget about conditioning as well. So track cycling, separate conditioning work is important. Watching on a watt bike sometimes can be very useful depending on how much track work you're doing or how intense the season is or where you are. But there you go. That's it.
That's it
You'll
then.
just see your watts. If you increase those, you'll see your watts go up. And if that doesn't make you better at your sport, that's not my fault. That's as far as we can do for you. That's as much as we can do.
Yeah, track cycling is like the poster child for strength training.
All sports actually are in a lot of ways.
Half chicken, half egg says horse, horse, horse.
Like, see.
Obviously watching Cheltenham today.
Is John on?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Good morning.
Alan Warren.
Waiting on.
Do you have Alan Warren?
Yeah.
Alan Warren says, my girlfriend is thinking of using the app, but is worried the programs won't suit her. Are all of your programs suitable for women as they are, or do they change based on gender? So you'll see on the app, right, there's certain programs have a female stream to them. So basic strength, like the beginner strength program, has a female stream in there. Now, what's the difference between the female stream and the male stream? Well, the main difference is with some of the upper body work, particularly the upper body work involving pull-ups. So when we look at female athletes coming into the sport or female athletes coming into strength training, they don't really have that many differences than their male counterparts when they're both at the beginner level. But one of the main differences is that upper body strength, and particularly when it comes to upper body pulling strength, they're just not going to have the same capacity. So in that case, the pull-up progressions, chin-up progressions, lateral rows, those progressions are slightly altered to allow for that to happen. When we look at some of the other programs, so some of the other programs you might consider to be intermediate level or advanced level, we don't have male and female streams, but what we do have is streams where it's basically just tailored to the level of strength you have currently. So somebody with a 200 kilo back squat is going to progress slightly differently than somebody with a 100 kilo back squat. Same thing goes for the bench press. They're obviously not both going to add 10 kilos to each week. Those progression streams are slightly different. There are, of course, cases for every athlete, regardless of gender, where they'll need to make some sort of accommodations or they might need to change some exercises slightly. And that's why on the app, we don't have the option for you to change it. But what we do have the option is just you to chat to me and Garth directly. So you just go, press the coach button, it's on your home screen, it comes straight through to our phones and our laptops. We'll be able to answer those questions for you. A classic example of this, again, might be you don't have the equipment to do a movement, or let's say you're failing, it's 5x5 on pull-ups or 5x5 on chin-ups. You're failing on the fourth rep of the third set. What are you supposed to do now? We'll talk you through that, bring you through those kind of relative changes you need to make to the program, and then we can tweak things for you moving forward. So certainly at the very initial beginner phases, there is a split between male and female. You'll have to select that when you're setting up your program. Once you get to the more intermediate stage, then we'll work with you through kind of alteration of 1RM inputs and also just through substitutions we might need to make. We'll work with you directly on that, and you just ask us in the coach bot, or coach chat, sorry.
We need to get a coach bot out of our brains.
Yeah.
The Mr. Wedgeman says, advice for women after having kids get into the gym for the first time, also hypermobile. Not sure I've heard you talk about this much. Cheers. There's a very good reason we don't talk about this, is because the time post-pregnancy, or time post-giving birth, I suppose more specifically, is very unique and specific to females in that situation. And the reason we don't talk about it is because there is people who are very adept at helping at that. There's tons, mostly female PTs, who have a much better way of emphasizing what's going on there and understanding the process a bit better themselves, who do this way better than we ever could. There are people who are specifically trained in this, who've seen thousands of clients. After my wife gave birth, she still went to someone who specialized in this. So the reason we don't talk about it is because we have no expertise in this specific areas. We think about this like it's an injury rehab. If you're coming back from an ACL surgery, there's going to be physios out there who've seen 4,000 ACL rehabs, and they're going to be able to help you get back to baseline much faster. Now, Pregnancy isn't an injury, obviously, but it's pretty traumatic in terms of how you look at training. It has similar effects. So my recommendation here is there's tons of these people online. There's tons of them have programs ranging from dirt cheap to whatever you can afford. All of them are, there's definitely great ones out there. So if it's immediately post training or post pregnancy or post giving birth, then I'd say definitely reach out to one of those, and it'll be a much better experience for your, I assume you're talking about your wife here, for example. Now, in terms of if it's been years, if it's been a 6 months plus, a year plus since the birth, then what Dara was just talking about there was perfectly applicable, which is you base it based on your abilities, you adjust, you pick in the programs, you chat to us in the coach chat, for example, when it comes to our programs, and we'll help obviously everyone, regardless if you're a woman who's just given birth or someone who's new to training. So once you get beyond that, let's call it recovery phase or time after giving birth, then it's just relatively normal. If someone's new to the gym, it doesn't really matter if they're male or female. There's some considerations to be had, and we can help with those. Now, hypermobility, best way to think about hypermobility is lack of strength. Strength training and muscle mass are the cure for hypermobility, if you were to call something a cure. Just getting stronger and getting more muscle mass is the cure. You wouldn't believe it now, but I used to be hypermobile when I started weightlifting.
No, I can't straighten my arms.
No, that's good. Look at those. They're fantastic. I used to be, when I started weightlifting, I was 75 kilos and I was hypermobile. Crazy levels of mobility. And strength training and muscle mass cure that for you. So hypermobility, male or female, the solution is strength training. You don't have to do any specific stuff. Isometrics can be very useful if it's a major problem. But, you know, even if you had, say, hyperextension in your elbows and you'd which I do not, if you went way beyond 180, for example, like Dara's kind of beyond 180, and if you had that even further, you know, if you had the one where you're kind of like, ooh, when someone does it, you could do some more isometrics, would help build that proprioception, but just normal full range of motion, honest to God, strength training is the solution to hypermobility in pretty much all cases, unless there's this really quirky cause of hypermobility where it's a genetic issue or neurological or something causing it. And even in those cases, strength training is still probably the answer. So the reason we don't talk about postpartum stuff is because we don't know anything about it specifically. All we know, it's something that needs to be treated with care and kindness and understanding, and it's not something that we really know exactly what to do because there can be a lot of different situations around that. So we don't talk about stuff we don't know, which is, I think, is probably something a lot of people online could learn from, especially when it comes to coaches. There's a reason we just never talk about that situation, is because we couldn't begin to give you valuable advice. I wouldn't know where to start. Dara wouldn't know where to start. I'm sure we could learn, but there's people who would just be far better than us.
I've had one-to-one athletes who I coached for years, and when they came through that period of time, sent them elsewhere.
I mean, like,
and then came back afterwards. Like, it's by far the best thing to do is go to a specialist.
Like, especially my wife, like, you would think, who lives with me, would be able to help, and still we went to something different.
Yeah.
Like, we get that email, I'd say, at least once a week from someone, and every time it's just find someone. We actually should probably find someone.
I was just about to say, if anyone does know of anyone really good in the area.
Well, yeah, we could send you to probably better to have that on hand.
Not That Strong 1559 says, Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you too, 1559. Thoughts on pulls and deadlifts at percentages for beginners who are more technique limited? Example, my wife has a 50 kilo clean but a 115 kilo deadlift. Obviously, pulls are feeling overly light.
Everybody's asking about their partners.
So, obviously, it's...
Mother's Day coming up.
Oh, yeah.
Is Mother's Day everywhere, though?
I don't think so. I think it's different in the US. Anyway, look, this is something that people come up against all the time. They'll see on our programs, pulls ranging from about 70% of 1 rep max to about 110% of 1 rep max, and not really much heavier than that. I want you to think about the pulls, whether it's clean pull, clean high pull, snatch high pull, clean deadlift, snatch deadlift, heaving, hang cleans, whatever it is. If you're doing a pull, you are not doing it to get a stronger pull. I'll repeat it again. If you are doing a pull in weightlifting, you are not doing it to get a stronger pull on any of our programs. The main driver of strength and power development in weightlifting in all of our programs is going to be the back squat, to a secondary extent, the front squat, not the pulls. In every case, the pulls are there as a development of technique to increase your exposure to the first and second pull and to allow you to practice that part of the movement more. So in every case you're doing a pull in training, it's there as technical practice. So to kind of weigh in on the question even more, in the case of your wife, where it's a technical limitation, so technically she's limited where she has a 50 kilo clean, she can deadlift 115, so she could probably clean 90 kilos easily if her technique was perfect. In this case, you need to view all of those clean pulls and clean deadlifts as technique practice. What do I mean by this? Positions are identical at every point in the lift. Start position is identical. Position at the knee passage is identical. Position at contact with the quads is identical. Position at the end of the extension is identical. The more important thing laying in on top of that, aside from the mechanics, is the dynamics. So what does the barbell speed look like? Most people really mess up clean pulls and clean deadlifts, or snatch pulls and snatch deadlifts, by basically doing it as a deadlift. And what do I mean by that? They pull really hard going off the floor. The barbell gradually slows down as it gets to the hips. In fact, the opposite should be true at every point. I should be squeezing the barbell off the floor. The barbell should continue to accelerate at every point throughout the lift until I'm at that point of contact, whether that's with mid-quads, whether that's at the thighs, wherever you're making contact. The barbell should continue to get faster at every point throughout the lift. So I want you now to think about the case we're talking about here. Somebody who's incredibly strong at the clean pull or normal deadlift. Somebody who's incredibly strong there. The usual case is, oh, I'm just going to add 20 kilos so I can kind of get a bit of stimulus from it. What happens when we add 20 kilos? The bar slows down as it gets to the hips. It's now not emulating the same positions or dynamics that we want for the clean or the snatch. And now it's a waste of time because we know it's not going to be the main driver of strength or power adaptation. What we wanted to do was get technique practice. We're not getting that technique practice because it's not the same as the clean or as the snatch. And so now we're wasting our time with it. So we do get this question quite frequently. It is always the same thing. You need to treat it identically. And I mean to the point where you could pause the video at the point of extension and say, I'm not sure if that's going to be a snatch or I'm not sure if that's going to be a clean. I would say for everybody watching the stream here who's a weightlifter, go and do that with your most recent video of a heavy clean pull. You'll be able to tell it's a clean pull within the first 4 inches of the bar moving off the floor. So make sure it's identical. Make sure you're treating it as technical practice, and never be worried that it's too light.
Let me just take the audio.
It's always the same thing.
I'm always paranoid with that audio.
Yeah.
Ben Cotter said, doing the 4-day-a-week weightlifting program at the moment, but I feel like I'm not getting enough practice at the lifts. Any thoughts? Yes, I have a lot of thoughts. So this goes for everyone running any program ever, not just ours. When you're doing a program, when you enter a program, unless you're getting injured, your thought process should be, this is the most amazing program I've ever run. This is the perfect program for me. Every session, every exercise, every set and rep you do, you think this, for me, is perfect. This is exactly what I need right now. This is what I need to do to get better, regardless if it's our program or not. That might not be true after the program's done, but while you're doing it, if you've made a decision to do a program, and unless it's injuring you, when you're doing a program, don't even entertain these questions. This isn't biased just for our specific one here. I can't emphasize that enough. Even if you pick the worst program in the world, just believe every single session is excellent. Believe this is masterminded. If the gods of weightlifting came down and wrote you a 4-day-week program for exactly your body type and your genetics and your situation in life and your technique, this is how you think about that program, and you don't entertain any other thought process. This is how you get the most out of programs. One of the big things with the rotating squat program at this stage, one of the variables is it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because so many people have run the program, so many people have gotten great results from the program, that when other people come into the program and they've seen their friends do it or online do it or they've heard about it, they're like, this can't be me, and this, because I'm going to make this work because it's clearly such a good program. Like it adds to the effectiveness of the program. So that's the first thing, regardless if it's our program or not, Ben. Any program you run, you don't even think about changing it. You finish the program, see what results you get, and then you decide. However, I'll talk about this specific case in regards to weightlifting. I'd say you're almost certainly wrong. And I mean that respectfully as possible. And that is to say, we wrote those programs for a reason. We see literally hundreds of weightlifters every week on the app, for example, among many other athletes. We see how they progress, how they're changing. So I would say, again, tell me if this sounds douchey, but if you weigh up what we've written as a program intended for the average person who's going to be running our program, you should assume that what we've given you is enough for the program, and that unless you are incredibly well adapted, you've coached thousands of lifters, you should also, and I'm not being defensive here, I mean for your own
Yeah.
benefit, Connor, is you should think that this program is believe there's a reason we've given that much. Now we'll talk about this specifically, and we're talking about this in a podcast that we just put out on Tuesday on Spotify. We're talking about most weightlifters get stuck in weightlifting because they think the answer is just more snatching, more clean and jerking. Now that is the answer for more experienced lifters. That's the answer for late stage, intermediate, very, 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 very early beginners in some regard, and then elite level lifters. But most people don't fall into that. Most people lack the other qualities. They lack quality over quantity. They think doing more snatching, more clean and jerking at their position is going to make them better. But really, you need to develop all those other areas. You need to make sure that because you're not a full-time athlete, you are doing plenty of other things in your life. You are doing your work, I assume, or you're studying, or you've got relationships. I can probably assume fairly that you're not a full-time athlete. So in that scenario, when you are in that position, you need to ensure that every time you go to snatch or clean and jerk, you need to develop your technique on those. You need to make sure you're hitting good quality sets and reps on those. But then you also need to entertain that you need to be doing your pulling, your squatting, your assistance work. You need to be recovering for those and hitting those optimally. Because the biggest thing where you hear, in weightlifting, it comes up year after year now, and you hear, is it strength versus technique in weightlifting? But really what it is in weightlifting is it strength and general physical preparedness. So it's your base abilities in all the other areas regards to weightlifting. And most weightlifters, technique is incredibly important. There's no end to how good your technique could be. And obviously we've made tons of technique videos and we'll make tons more. It's massively important, of course. But in absence of the other areas of development, in absence of being able to recover for training, in the absence of having a stronger back, stronger legs, better work capacity, better agility, better speed, better mobility, that will only take you so far. And it's why we see a lot of the average CrossFitter of varying ages being essentially as good as the average hobbyist weightlifter is because even though they spend way less time doing weightlifting, they've spent so much time developing other areas that when they do their infrequent snatches or they do their snatches once a week, for example, that's not what's in your program, but when they do that, they're able to do that because all the other physical capacity is so well developed that they're able to hit those lifts. Tons of weightlifters have had this experience where you snatched 100 kilos once and you haven't done it in 2 years. That's not really because your technique is so bad. If a technique is good enough to snatch 100 kilos once, it's good enough to do it again. But what you lack is the ability to have, or not you specifically, Ben, I don't know what your numbers obviously are, but just the average weightlifter, is they lack the physical robustness to repeat those numbers. Because that 100 kilo snatch that you could never repeat, or 90 or whatever, was so physically taxing. It required all of your general physical preparedness planets to align that when you tried to do that session, you were able to hit it once on one good day with a ton of hype. But because it couldn't be repeated, because we lacked these other areas of development. So it comes down to developing things that you need to develop, and leaning into the lifts too much just isn't the answer we've seen for the average lifters. Obviously, it's the right amount for most people, is what we see. Very rarely do people need to do more often. Like if you take, I think a good example, if you watch Gabriel training at the moment, I think he's documented a lot of it. I think he's training 4 times a week at the moment. I'm pretty sure he's doing 2 snatches, maybe 2 plus a variation or something like that. For most people, higher frequency isn't the answer. Now, look, if you were fresh an athlete and you're on a gram of gear,
Hell yeah, brother.
get snatching 9 times a week, for sure. Get clean and jerking 3 times a week, say, for example. But for everyone else, it's quality, develop the other areas around that, quality of snatches, clean and jerking, and then that's what makes it better. Don't, and again, I'm not saying this about you specifically, Ben, and it's not defensive around our program, but we were just talking about this in regards to beforehand with the All Blacks coach was essentially pushed out because the players didn't think he was good enough. you have to assume that your thought process around something, if someone's helping you or you're doing their programming, is incorrect. That's the best way to approach that. You shouldn't be questioning things. And we've talked about this a lot, and I was talking about this, I think, on the podcast as well, where a couple of years ago when I was doing a jiu-jitsu competition, I was fighting, or whatever, people get annoyed if people say jiu-jitsu, say fighting. I had a match against someone who was, I'd say 11 feet tall, maybe 12. Think he was 12 feet tall?
He was certainly over 6 foot tall.
Over 6 foot tall. And I said to my coach, I was like, can I try this before the match? Because I'd won the last 3 matches. My coach was like, no. And do you know what I did?
Didn't try it.
I didn't try it.
Yeah.
When you go learn from someone, when Anton gives me feedback on my technique, I don't go, oh, I don't think Anton's right. I go, okay,
Yeah.
that is what I am trying until proven otherwise.
I
promise you, it's everywhere in life, regardless of our program or not. I couldn't be more passionate about this. If you get help from someone, do what they say or don't do it, but don't half-ass it. You'd be better off just not doing the program if you start kind of being like, oh, maybe, I'm not sure. It's really anything in life, regardless if it's training, education, apprenticeship, career advice. If you go to someone for help and you think they're worthwhile, until you are proven otherwise and you've got experience, you should just go, fuck, I might be wrong. Like we were talking about this in the podcast the other week. We're talking, like I've been shooting for, I think, about 8 years now. And there's Dara and another gentleman are like basically experts. This gentleman has done, he actually works, I won't say what he works in, he does a lot of shooting. And my opinion is, even if something is working for me right now, and he says the opposite of that is better for shooting, I just immediately assume I am wrong. What I assume is I was succeeding in spite of that thing that I'm doing. Even if something is working for me every single time, and he says, I know for a fact this is a suboptimal way of shooting a gun, I would be like, right, well, I've been wrong.
Yeah.
I promise you.
But I treat it the same way.
It's just, it holds you back so much.
I cannot, this idea, right? The amount of buy-in and the amount of intent with your training matters more than almost anything else. Martin Treza said it, you have to follow it like it's a religion. And I cannot emphasize how important that is. In any sport, in any training, whatever you're doing, lads, there are people who will run their best ever time in a race by doing couch to 5K, right? Is there better programs? Yes. Are there better ways of training? Yes. But if you follow something and you understand that you're going to follow that no matter what, it trumps almost any amount of sports science that comes behind it. And I know it sounds like we're kind of just weighing in and saying, oh, you have to follow the program. Lads, this goes for everything. It's
If
you're
you
not
said someone else's program here, I'd give you the exact same answer for sure.
like you're not buying tires in a tire shop and they're trying to upsell you here, right? You're not trying to get the best deal on a builder coming and doing work in your house and you think they're like, with training, the psychological buy-in and the emotional buy-in is absolutely gigantic. Anybody who tells you it's not either hasn't been involved in sport long enough or else is lying to you. I cannot emphasize this enough. If you're going to do something, and look, it takes time, right? You're doing this 4 times a week. You've invested in the training program or the app or whatever it is, and you want to get the most out of it, and it's your competitive outlet, it's your training, your physical development that's coming along with this. If you're going to go and do something like that and give it the time, the investment, the time invested, the money invested, the pain of actually doing the training sessions, the stiffness the next day, the amount of food you're going to have to eat, the amount of sleep you're going to have to do, the amount of sacrifice you're going to have to do, for God's sake, just follow it as closely as you possibly can. Like, give yourself that option to do it. It's like going out into the desert without a bottle of water to sustain yourself. The belief and the following along with something. I get it, we're all in this kind of internet quasi thing of we're all scientists and we're all evaluating everything all the time. If somebody who played on a rugby team I was coaching on was constantly coaching or constantly questioning things, I would pull them aside immediately and immediately cut that off, because it's buy-in is what matters most. And when you're involved at an intermediate or amateur level here, buy-in is absolutely incalculable how important it is.
And like, again, we just do want to emphasize, we're not ragging on you specifically, Ben.
No.
If you go back 2 podcasts ago, we were talking about this in regards to the ego thing. Or not saying this is an ego issue here. You're just asking an honest question.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's totally fine. But this is just as in general. We're not even talking again about weightlifting here. We're talking about anything. Yeah, if you do if you get into something, it's just, you just should just be all in. If you do a cottage course or something like that, don't think halfway through, you're like, is this the right one for me? I've known people who've given up in 4th year in college courses.
Insane.
Just
Yeah.
buy into the things you get into. It'll get you so much further. Obviously, reevaluate at different points and look at things. And if you're getting hurt, and if it's been 4 years since you made progress.
Yeah, or you've run the program twice and not hit PBs.
Yeah, then that's
Perfect.
fair.
Go find a different program.
If you'd said, I'm doing Gabriel's program or Clarence's program,
Exact same answer.
I would say buy into their program for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
High, above, below. Is that what
No.
you have next?
No, Dan Martin, how much mobility is the minimum requirement for the jerk?
There's like 5 in between here.
You've got top messages on.
Oh my God.
I can't decide if my technique is letting me down more than likely or I'm simply not mobile enough. Dan, I would say almost certainly it's both of these. So when it comes to technique, your technique can always be better. And it's fair to say that if you're anywhere within the first probably 8 years, there's probably significant improvements that we can make to your technique that would improve that performance. So one, technique is almost certainly an issue here. But there's an interesting thing that happens in weightlifting is that people can be almost mobile enough and it feels more than sufficient. But what we really want is to be able to be as freely getting into those positions as much as possible. So there's something known it comes from, I think, osteopaths, but neuromuscular therapists talk about this as well, where it's known as the first area of bind is one of the phrases they use, right? So if we were to do a hip mobility test or a shoulder mobility test, and you were looking at external rotation here, for example, and you were doing this on your own volition or the therapist was testing you, and let's say you could go well beyond 180 degrees if we looked at this from the side, and you could get to 190, but the last 20 degrees required a lot of effort from you. If the therapist was doing it or you were doing it, you met this kind of resistance, and then you could kind of crank it a little bit further. What that would be known as the first area of bind, where your body starts to inhibit that range of motion a little bit. And it's very interesting. And what can happen is, as we warm up and we do heavier weights and stuff, and we're putting the barbell overhead in the warm up, we're like, yeah, you know what, my mobility is pretty good currently. But it can always be better. And any amount of inhibition in weightlifting until we get to the other end of the spectrum where you're hypermobile is an issue. If there's inhibition in getting freely into the bottom position, if there's any inhibition in getting into that overhead position with the jerk, all of these could be improved a little bit. Because if you think about it, it's kind of like you're adding extra weight to that barbell when you're going into the overhead position. If you require more contraction, more force, more voluntary contraction to extend your elbows from here to here, even if you're just a little bit less mobile than you could be, you're technically adding a couple of kilos to the barbell, and it's making it harder. You'll have to put more force in to not only get your arm to extend to that full range of motion, to the locked out position, but you're also putting yourself in a position where you're trying to force that weight with that when you're already inhibited. So what I would say here is, without seeing your lift down, technique almost certainly could be improved. The jerk doesn't even get enough credit, to be honest, for how technical it is and how important some of the technical changes are. But on top of that, very often we can be in a position where we're pretty mobile, but in fact we could even be further. I was watching the Alien Science of Documentary Victory recently when I was getting amped up for training, and I'm thinking, you know what, I should take a gram of gear, or whatever he was taking, I don't know. But they were stretching Ilya in the video, and it always blows my mind. Even when Ilya is just 112 kilos of thick androgens, his hamstring is like he can just nearly kick his forehead with a straight leg. They're stretching him, and his arms they're doing manual stretches with him, which is fantastic if you can get someone to do that. And he's so mobile, he's so elastic. The suppleness, the pliability of his tissue has to be an inherent genetic gift for him. Now, obviously, they were doing tons of manual stretching and pretty aggressively, but he clearly just has the talent for that to maintain it in those conditions. And weightlifting is such a skilled sport, but inherently needs a lot of these physical talents. So again, technique almost certainly an issue, but if you even wonder mobility being an issue, it's probably an issue. It probably is and could be even better. Because what will happen is if you improve that mobility and then you do it one set of jerks or 2 or 3 sets, and you see how much easier it is to get into that overhead position, suddenly you'll be like, oh, it was technique mobility. Because sometimes you don't even know, because when you use that same range of motion, that same position over and over again, you just get really used to it. And unless it's very inhibitory until you improve it a little bit further, then you go, oh, wait a minute, it could be even better. Now, high above below is next.
High above below says, is it counterproductive to do sprints and endurance on the same day? For instance, running hill sprints and plyos in the morning and a 60 to 90 minute zone 2 bike ride 4 or 5 hours later.
That's a good question.
No. Okay, so yes, it is a good question, but no, it's not counterproductive. So what you're asking about here, or the main topic kind of surrounding this, is the interference effect. Relative interference of different modalities of training when trained in proximity to each other. So if we imagine when we're sprinting, we're getting as much physiological adaptation in the direction of fast twitch fibers as we possibly can. When we're doing endurance training, we're getting the opposite, and these things cross over and interfere with each other. The reality of this, outside of theoretical sports science or outside of the sports science lab, is when we're 4 or 5 hours out from the thing, it's really not going to have that much of an effect. But the more important thing above all else is that, generally speaking, when you're looking at... Are we all good? Treated identically, and I mean we're just going to check audio here for a quick second. Might have that much of effect, but the more important thing above all else is that, generally speaking, when you're looking at... We're back. Are we all good?
Fucking hell, why did I cut off?
We lost the mics. We're just going to check audio here for a quick second. Might have that much of effect, but it's that USB-C port. Above all else is that, generally speaking, when you're... High above below, I'll just finish answering your question because... We're back. Are we all good?
Fucking hell, why did
that won't come back.
No, just making sure.
We're just going to check audio here for a quick second. Might have that much of effect, but it's that USB-C port. Above all else.
Oh, it's hard to tell. No, I don't think it is gone. No, turn this down. Talk there again.
So, the other thing is there's so much of a delay between Riverside and the other thing. Anyway, high above below, the real reason it doesn't have that much of an effect is because most of the time when we're doing sprinting and plyometric training, the real results don't necessarily come from that fiber type expression or the relative hypertrophy of cross-sectional area of those fibers in relation to the other fibers. Generally, your sprint work here, so let's say hill sprints and some plyos. In the plyos, you're probably gaining some relative stiffness of those joints, so ankles, knees, and hips. The stiffness, the skill of that stiffness is improving. Also, you're actually improving the skills of the movements themselves. So in the plyometric movements, we're getting better at twitching a little bit faster, we're getting better at the movement, our ground contact times are lower, the relative reactionary force of the amount of force coming through each of those strides is higher and higher each time, and that's really a skill element in a lot of the cases here. The second thing that comes along with that skill element then is relative work capacity. So if you're doing hill sprints, you're getting a little bit fitter, which allows you to run a little bit faster on those hill sprints. How much of that is relative fiber type expression is very, 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 very low. Now, obviously, if you're doing that for a long period of time, or you're doing it very intently, or you're doing it in a very prioritized period of training, then there is some amount of that will occur. But generally speaking, for most of us, particularly for hybrid athletes, right, and I'm going to assume you're in the hybrid athlete category here, the fact that you're doing both of these types of training, or technically 3 different types of training in one day, that's not really where you're going to see the relative improvement across those sprinting, the hill sprints and the plyos. So don't worry about it at all. Now, the area where I actually do begin to worry, and where I do have far more concern for people's effectiveness of their training, is when we start to get this stacking of stress across the day, right? So let's say, for example, in the morning you do your plyos, then you do your hill sprints, and you have 4 or 5 hours at your lunch break, or when you finish work in the evening, you're going to go and do your zone 2 on the bike. What I'm looking at there is if we start getting stress of the Achilles tendons, we start getting increased systematic or chronic tightness of the quads or hamstrings or calves, and now suddenly we start opening ourselves up to issues occurring similar to shin splints. We start getting that soreness, tightness, redness, hotness around the knees. We start getting twings or pings in our hamstrings when we start to sprint the next time. And generally in the sense where you're just opening yourself up to more of that chronic or repetitive strain type injury. That's where my real concern comes here. That's why when we have athletes in the hybrid realms or in the first responder and selection prep realms where we're doing multiple modes of training in one day, that's where my real concern lies. My real concern isn't necessarily lying in the relative effectiveness of both of those modes of training. Where my real concern comes in is, am I going to overstress a couple of areas? Am I going to really overstress a grouping of tendons or a grouping of muscles around a certain joint? And that's where my real concern is. My real concern really isn't in the relative effectiveness of both of those trained at the same time. Real concern comes in is, oh, that sounds pretty good. Overstress a couple of areas. Am I going to really overstress a grouping of tendons or a grouping of muscles around a certain joint? And that's where my real concern is. My real concern really isn't in the relative.
Yeah, there's a lot. So annoying.
Yeah.
Do you know what? We'll finish this live stream.
Yeah.
Because we need to go soon anyway. But we need to figure out a better way of connecting the DJI to the. Someone just confirmed the audio is good enough to listen to. I think that's okay. For some reason, the DJI has a. So it comes in horizontally onto the back of the unit. But then you also push the unit in horizontally. So then it gets pushed out, and it's incredibly delicate contact. It just makes no sense.
Look, I'm just going to say it now.
It's a terrible design.
That this is the breakdown between product design and mechanical and electrical engineering.
Where did they think?
Who signed off on that? Where you have, it's basically like an adapter on this, and as you push it in, you're also pushing that out.
Makes no sense.
It's lunacy.
Not That Strong said, should these be going by feel or be at the early stages of weightlifting training, providing positions remain strong? You should be following a program, definitely, but also it's not so much feel, it's about correct positions. So obviously you could have someone who could come into weightlifting and they've got a 400 kilo deadlift, and if we don't kind of zone in on the specific positions early, you're just going to ingrain worse positions, and then obviously you're going to make things way harder for you to correct later when you get into a different program and you try and correct those technical positions. So you should be following a program because you need to be trying progressing, you need to be trying improving, but you also want to be making sure that it's not RPE. No one really uses RPE in weightlifting to a major extent. It's following good positions along the way, and then if positions are regressing really poorly, then we need to adjust that. So in weightlifting, when you're a newer lifter, you can kind of improve positions as weightlifting goes along. You can refine them a little bit better because the weights are light enough for you to be able to voluntarily think about a position, improve it, your skill will improve, different physiological adaptations will be happening, you'll be able to relax certain muscles faster, all that good stuff. So if you have, assuming you have good guidance from us or someone else, while you're doing a program, you will be better off. So again, not even saying you should be doing one of our programs or something like that. I just mean following a program as a beginner will constrain the resource variables, make sure you're recovering correctly, make sure you're doing the right things at the right time and you're not doing too much of one thing or too little of another thing. But then there's also that caveat that if things have gone to absolute SHIT, then you need to make sure you're putting back. So RPE isn't really it. In fact, I'd say RPE is definitely not it here. Not only because we don't love RPE as a guidance for prescribing weight, but also RPE is based off of that you have some experience with the thing you're doing. So your experience, again, as someone new to weightlifting, is going to be wildly incorrect. It's going to be all over the place from one session to the next. Especially if you come in and you're kind of strong already, it's going to be even more effed up. So I'd say definitely relying on your own intuition for these sessions is almost certainly a poor idea, unless the RPE you set for yourself is every session I'm going to make sure it's like an RPE 2, for example.
Who do we have next?
The Tarp said, couple of questions about finishing row linear squat, row linear part 2. Slow bulking while running it at the moment. Run it again straight after, or some maintenance. If I run again, okay to slow cut during the first few weeks to trim the fat a bit.
Right. So the first thing here, a general comment for everybody who wants to run a squat program, run the RTA2. I feel like it's a better way of getting there. But with the slow bulking while running it, this is the best way of running that program. So the idea of slow bulking or the idea of just training while in a surplus, you're going to get way better outcomes training in a slight surplus of calories than you will in maintenance or you will in that kind of slow cut. So the idea now, running it in slow bulk, you're in a pretty much ideal situation to get a bigger squat. The idea of running it immediately after probably isn't the best route, but certainly it's not the best route if you're now going to go into a slow cut or go into more of a maintenance or like a slight deficit while you're doing it. A far better situation will be to run a slight bit of an off season, and I'm talking about 4, 6, or 8 weeks in an off season strength and hypertrophy phase. Run that while you're in your cutting phase. So block 1 and block 2 of off season, it will be absolutely perfect to run that in a 10% deficit as you're going through the normal training week. Those sessions will lend themselves well to the cut. There's a lot of work in there. There's a lot of volume in there. There's a lot of supersets in there. So you're going to be far better suited to trimming those bits of fat when you're in that training environment, and then go back in and run the RTA2 again. I think that is as close to the ideal situation as you're going to get.
Okay, well, we need to pick a few there before we go. A little bit shorter today because some things to do, but I want to answer.
Oh, Trusman. Do you have
I
Trusman?
was going to do Oliver Miller there first. He said, might be a weird question, but I was wondering if you have any tips on how to improve a lagging squat. My deadlift is almost double my squat. I'm somewhat of a beginner. My squat form is very good. I squat about 100 kilos and deadlift 210. Holy moly.
Holy moly.
I squat twice a week and deadlift once a week. So first thing I would say here is it's almost certainly your technique the form of your squat isn't very good. There's probably a lot that you can improve on here. There's just no way you have the capacity to display enough strength to deadlift 210 and only squat 100 kilos if your form is good. I'd have to assume your form is lacking in several ways here because this battery's exhausted. Oh.
Yeah. That's plugged in.
Technical difficulties today. Will you just throw a battery in there with that stuff?
Yeah.
So just finish, Oliver. So when it comes to this, even if your programming is absolutely terrible, even if your program is the worst programming ever, if you have the strength to deadlift 210 and you have any form of reasonable squat technique, I'd imagine you'd probably be able to squat 100 kilo 140 here, 150 or something like that. Now converging the gap comes up to you need to improve your squat technique and you need to improve your programming and how you go about it. I'd say flick it back on now for me.
Is it back on?
That's back on now. Here we go. So when it comes to both of these, you need to improve your squat technique and you need to improve your programming. Now, obviously, I'm going to be biased and say run the Seeker Strength app, whatever, but run a good squat program, assuming you're not already. I like the frequencies you're doing currently. 2 squats per week, 1 deadlift is the sweet spot. I really like that for long-term training. Or you can do like 1-in-1 variation on the deadlift, but 2-to-1, I really like that variation there. But I would say, I'd have to imagine, without seeing your squat, Oliver, that your technique is severely lacking somewhere. There's just no way you have the force capability to deadlift 210 kilos, which is a great deadlift, and only squat 100 kilos. There's just no way. I refuse to believe it. The only explanation here is your technique sucks. I just can't. Even if you're doing the dumbest programming ever, you would have had to squat 140 by accident. I promise, Oliver. So you just need to see what's going on. Technically, programming probably is lacking here to some degree as well. But even by accident, you should have squatted 140 now at this stage. MacArthur, was that the one you wanted?
No.
Well, I want you to answer that one anyway. Hey lads, should we always program IATG back squats, all things back squats? Ask the grass back squats during in-season training, AFL. A great sport ball account. Thinking of swapping with single leg squats. Boom!
Okay.
Thanks as always.
So the first thing is, when you're looking at squatting in the in-season, you really need to think, why are you squatting in the in-season? So generally speaking, we need a large bipedal exercise. We need strong contractions. So what I mean by that is there's no point squatting 50% of 1 rep max for 20 reps or something like that, or 40% for 20 reps. You need strong muscular contractions because we really want that high level of neural drive to be expressing the best power and the best speed numbers possible. Thus, The single leg squats being swapped in for standard squats is not going to be your option. In terms of full ass to grass squats, right? Full ass to grass squats will do a couple of things for us. They'll maintain range of motion through those joints, which is really valuable in season. They'll also probably give us a better hypertrophy maintenance stimulus than a partial range of motion or a box squat will. So when we're in season, most players are slowly losing weight and muscle mass throughout the entire season. So they've started here with the most muscle they're going to have at the start of preseason, and they'll slowly degrade the amount of muscle tissue they have until their season ends. Because we're on the pitch more, playing games more, we've higher energy output demands, and we're not getting that stimulus we need. The full range of motion squat will give us better hypertrophy maintenance stimulus, so that will be another tick in that box. But when we look at the use of box squats, squats to parallel, partial range of motion squats, the only real good application for those is in the in-season. So what are we getting by using those? We're getting less overall fatigue. We're getting higher levels of muscular contraction because the absolute force we have to put into the floor is going to be stronger. So let's say you have 200 kilo 1RM. In season, if you're doing standard ass to grass squats, you're probably going to do 140 for 5x5 or something like that. If we do the box squats, you'll probably be able to do 170 or 180 for 3 sets of 5 or something along those lines. Stronger contractions, but it won't fatigue you quite as much, and you're using heavier weights. So there are certain advantages to using them. In my opinion, in a sport like AFL, and I'll put AFL into a grouping similar to our own sport of Gaelic football, or even similar to soccer, I would say AFL players don't necessarily need to be as concerned with moving those extremely heavy loads in season. They should be more concerned with hypertrophy maintenance. They should be more concerned with range of motion through those certain joints. And so in my opinion, the maintenance of ass to grass high bar style back squats will be far more beneficial for an AFL player. And the partial range of motion or the partial range of motion box squats will not be as applicable as they would be for somebody who's doing something like throwing, as they would be for somebody who's doing something like rugby or American football, where those higher loads, higher force items are going to be more beneficial. So I think in season for AFL, there is an application for partial range of motion or a box squat. It's probably not going to be as applicable as it would be for a sport like rugby, for throwing, for some of the track and field events. And in my opinion, the ass grass will be a bit better.
Yeah, the big thing here is one squat variation, basically back squats, and one single leg variation that you go to town on is almost
Go at it.
just go at it. Usually Bulgarians, I think that just gives the opportunity to load them very effectively. There's numerous ways we can do that. We can go from a barbell on our back to holding dumbbells to goblet squat position or zercher squat position or wearing weighted vests and a combination of these. There's a tons of ways we can do that effectively. And then back squats, obviously, we find incredibly effective. But you could do front squats and what are the other? We like front foot raise, split squats as well, for example, really pushing the front knee over the toe. Just pick one of each, especially in season. One of each is nice. And just make sure you maintain them, stop them decaying too much, or if there's an opportunity there and it makes sense, push them on a little bit. Choosman, what periodization do you recommend for an athlete if the goal is long-term development in fitness and strength? Train both attributes at the same training week or have periods focusing on one attribute and maintaining the other? So, first of all, one thing we need to understand when we're talking about periodization, and I think it's sometimes it gets lost a little bit, and people don't talk about periodization that much anymore. There used to be this thing where every article on T Nation or Lead FDS was, what kind of periodization do you follow? And then it got kind of caught up in like periodization versus conjugate, and then we got caught up in programming versus periodization. So the way we like to think about periodization, and it's, well, I'm going to think it's the correct way. Periodization is the point from going from a less specific state that's not as peaked to a more specific state. Everybody technically periodizes. Everybody goes from less in shape for whatever your goal is, whether that's strength training, whether that's conditioning, whether that's speed, power, mobility. Everything is technically periodized. Even if you want to call it something else, if you want to say conjugate is periodization, it is. If you were to look at these brass tacks on paper, you're going from a position where you're not as fit for your sport, fit meaning at your peak condition, to that position. How you go about getting there is a bit more in the weeds on programming, how you go about doing things, right? There's some good nuance there. But when you think about what periodization you recommend for an athlete, we've got basically two styles of programming that we could offer here, or that we could offer you to think about, is what I should say. So all of these will go from a place of not as intense to more intense. So if we start thinking about that, you can do it what will be known as concurrently. You can try and improve your strength and your fitness at the same time. But both of these will go from less specific, usually higher volume, less intense, either less intense conditioning, less heavy weights, not intensity of output and how that feels to you, obviously, to more intense, aka a higher peak, a faster one rep back, or a faster sprint, or a faster run, or a longer run. Whatever you deem to be your goal for those, you're going from, again, less specific to more specific. Now, what you can do here is you can try to do them concurrently. So we start both of these where we do some squatting and we're doing some running. Or we can segregate these out a little bit more into what might fit into something known as block periodization. But the implication for some people who interpret block periodization as very segmented sections of training where we stop all one style of training and we only do one. So if you were to try and be disingenuous about block periodization, you're trying to be a bit of a meme of it, you would say you would only do strength and no fitness, then you would hope that you would maintain strength when you go into the fitness block and then try and peak both of those. But that's not really what people do. So if you wanted to be more specific, you could say you are doing concurrent with a larger emphasis on one of these. One of these will be your weakness first or your strength first, depending on how you want to program it, depending on how you can program it for yourself, depending on how good you are at those, how close to either one of those your goals are at. So for example, if you were, let's take a squat and a run here, if you're talking about strength and fitness, or a deadlift and a run, if your deadlift is really strong and is really close to what you want it to be, then in this case, you need to spend less of that concurrent block focusing on your strength, and assuming your strength is really close to it, but your weakness is your fitness, you would have a longer concurrent block focusing more on fitness. So you think about it that way. Technically, that's some form of block periodization. Technically, someone would call that concurrent periodization. But all it is emphasizing some variables, going from a less specific state of peak fitness, and fitness meaning strength or fitness or power, whatever, just fitness in the sports science sense of the word, to a more specific one. So again, we can go really aggressively concurrently. Hard to do, hard to program, hard to balance unless you understand yourself and you're programming really well. Almost certainly some form of short to medium term concurrent block periodization, which kind of sounds like an oxymoron.
Positive, negative periodization.
You're ramming two magnets together. So you're going from a block emphasizing one but doing both, and then the next block, and it might be reasonably seamless, to it emphasizing the other one, whichever makes more sense. So I hope that answers your question.
For me, with loads of the hybrid people now, how I explain this is you're going to spend most of your time doing classical block periodization. Now, classical block periodization, as Owen was talking about, let's say you want to squat and you want to run at the same time. Most of your time you're going to be prioritizing one of those. The other one you can still be doing concurrently, but it's kind of just maintenance on the side. So I would still classify that as classical block periodization. Most of your year, let's say 8 months of your year, you're going to be focusing on an element of training you're going to get better. This goes for CrossFit people, hybrid people, high rocks people, all those people who are training multiple things. You should be doing classical blocks of periodized training for about 2/3 of your year. Then for the other 4 months, I think you should be hitting concurrent training. If the idea of being fit and strong at the same time is something that appeals to you, you have to walk the walk of doing the hybrid thing, and that should be for about 1/3 of your year. And it's hilarious to say, like, you're going to block periodized concurrent training, but that's basically what you're going to do. You're going to do strength specific block, fitness specific block, concurrent block, which is oxymoronic in a way we can't really get into today.
Look at the separation. Look at that. Oh, yes.
Don't mind that cracking.
Unbelievable. Right, I think we need to go.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for watching. Sorry about the audio today. We're going to have to figure out a better way of connecting the
I think we
DJI.
might have to use this Wazzer.
Hardware is just so irritating and software. It's just work.
Everything is.
Why don't you work?
Yeah.
Why don't you just work right?
Why isn't there a Tika T3 version of laptops and mics?
Thanks for everyone for watching. Remember, someone actually asked, is there new wasting programs coming to the app anytime soon? There's a ton of new programs coming to the app. They'll all be released together. You'll be very aware of it because we won't shut up about it when it happens. But we're still a little bit away from it yet. New strength training, hybrid weightlifting, and athlete programs. A ton of them coming. We're very happy with what we have to do now, but we're just still in the process of getting them done. Remember, Annual was just launched a couple of weeks ago. It's currently at $299 for the year. It should be $479 if you pay the monthly price for 12 months. I do not see it going back to $299 for the rest of this year. Going by the current uptake, I think we'll probably have another 2 or 3 weeks left at this level of uptake. There's only a certain number of people we want to take at this amount because obviously we spend a ton of time on the app and making sure we're helping people, and we have a ton of time doing everything else. So we can't give everyone this price, but we want to take care of everyone who's currently on the app, or who was on it before, or who wants to come back to it, or currently want to take care of current customers. Because most companies only take care of you when you join or when you're leaving. We want to make sure you get it now. And if you get $299 now, as long as you stay subscribed, every subsequent annual year will stay at $299. You'll never pay more than that. You get 4 videos per month. It's a bargain. People get great use out of the app. I'm looking at people signing up.
8 people have messaged us as we were live there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you just cleared that before we went live. So we spent a ton of time on it. $299. All these questions will be able to help you even more specifically. So have a stupendous weekend. Thank you for all your questions. We really appreciate them. We get a lot out of it. Informs us on the content we make. Clips. Then those clips do well. It helps us make content for this channel. It's all just a big cycle. Content is a flat circle, as they say about time. So have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Sunday.